Welcome all of you to the business analysis workshop. Let's start by introducing ourselves.
So repetition for those of you who were here. My name is Ingela Lapin. I'm working as a project manager for SuperOffice Sweden. I've been with SuperOffice for 7 years. Apart from being a project manager performing these workshops, I also work together with Camilla and Guttorm and the NIRs within Superland with developing and refining and distributing the SuperOffice implementation method, SIM.
Yes. Okay, my name is Camilla. I've been with SuperOffice for 6 years, next month. I'm Director of Services in SuperOffice Norway. I'm also Minister of Service and Support in Superland. Everyone knows what Superland is, United Kingdom of Superland. And work together with the NIRs, which stands for National Implementation Method Responsible. We have one in each country, and they bring back the feedback from the local markets to help improve and develop SIM further. SIM stands for suggestions. Software integration. No, that's not right. Yes.
SuperOffice is magnificent.
Yes. Any other suggestions? Because that one's true. Yes, right. We have just covered the pre-solution evaluation workshop. That's how we work with our customers' requirements and gain control of them. And we are now moved from that phase into the design phase. And because there are some new people here, I think we'll have to go through some of the background stuff again. So,
yes, continue or starting by giving you some foundations when it comes to SIM and the basic elements within SIM. So those who heard this just an hour ago, you can raise your hand when I ask you questions, and you can be brilliant students. You can just
yeah, and one comment, because the last session that we had, we were very happy with you as the participants, because you talked a lot, and we like that. We like to talk a lot as well. But when we ask questions, please answer. And nothing is wrong in this room. We're just here to learn and to get input on how to perform these workshops together with our customers even better. So just participate.
Yeah, and just interrupt at any time. There will be no Q&A at the end, and you would just ask away. But starting by placing the BA as the abbreviation for business analysis is BA. We use a lot of abbreviations. It's BA and PEC and CS, but it stands for business analysis. Continue. What you need to understand about SIM is that it is a framework with a lot of a number of supporting elements. It's of course the result that we come up with in different workshops and meetings that we document, and to be able to document them, we have a set of templates, which is sort of the deliverables from a lot of our meetings. The templates, of course, we in SuperOffice has put into our SuperOffice database, and you should definitely do the same as partners if you haven't done that yet. But before being able to put the result into a template, we also have some other elements. We have what we call task description, which is sort of an order confirmation that we send to the customer when they have ordered a service from us. This order confirmation or task description contains a description to the customer, what the customer needs to prepare in advance before our technical consultant or business consultant comes to the customer to be able to perform what he or she should perform. And what the consultant will do will also be stated in this document. And this is an agreement that the customer will receive beforehand and be able to discuss or ask questions. If we don't hear anything, we think that everything is fine, and we'll come and install, for example. And the content or the format is that you have stated at the top the things that the customer should prepare. And you also have a short description of what the consultant will deliver. So no questions or no misunderstandings there. The customer should know what to prepare, and they should also know what we are there for, or what we should do. And then we also have some general, we have the price and the estimated time, and we have the general agreements like traveling costs and working after office hours, etc. And also the system requirements, so that the customer also sees that these requirements should be met to be able to deliver the service. And by using this, you get a lot less discussions when it comes to pricing. And for example, if a consultant goes to a customer and are not able to install SuperOffice because the server isn't there yet, or it isn't prepared, the SQL or it hasn't been installed, etc. The discussions, you don't have to have the discussions about the payment, because it's stated here that this should be prepared by the customer. So it's a very good way to secure your service income by using the task descriptions.
We implemented this, I said this before as well, we implemented this sort of overnight in one of the subsidiaries. And we have the same number of consultants before we started using them as afterwards. And the income increased from 8 to 11 million on the same people. They did not work anymore, but they got paid for what they did. So this is what secures your income.
And to each task description, pretty much each task description, there's a corresponding best practice. And the best practice within SIM is a document describing how a certain service should be performed in the best way to secure the quality and to work in an efficient way towards the customer. So the best practice states it's normally an internal document for to use when there are new consultants coming in, and there are because we want the customer to have the same experience no matter what consultant that comes to the customer, because that could differ over time, and you need to secure that we are working in the most efficient way. But it could also be sent to the customer if the customer doesn't understand why it takes 1 day to install SuperOffice. This describes actually what we do and what we need to be aware of. So this could be sent to the customer if they want to, or if you want to. And then, I don't know how many best practices and task descriptions we have now, but say 40, something. Yeah, 40, 50 of each. And of course, it's the smallest entity within SuperOffice, or within SIM, it's the task description. It's the smallest tasks defined within the best practice and the task description. And there's a lot. It's installing SuperOffice, upgrading, importing, installing a satellite, installing Pocket, all these small activities that we do. And of course it could be for people that are not into that kind of work every day. So, for example, the salespeople or the customers themselves. It could be a good idea, we've done that sometimes, to group services together in packages. Services that fit together and give a certain result could be sold as service offerings. You can pick and choose. Either you can pick and choose and use the task descriptions and create your own offering, which is the result of a number of task descriptions. Or, as we've done over the years, we've done some predefined offerings. For example, the CRM menus that we had some time ago. So using the smallest entity and grouping them together, and also, of course, putting a nice marketing package and wordings on top of them, could be very useful to sell services or packages of services to customers. And easier maybe to communicate than the single services themselves. So if we just give you a brief idea of what SIM's about, it's the SuperOffice implementation method, and it contains 4 major phases. It's not rocket science to deliver SuperOffice. It looks pretty much the same as all kind of projects. I recognize even the namings in the Guttorm's project that you had. You used the same naming for initiate and design and implement. So it's something that we probably recognize. we have the identify phase, which is the first phase, where we, together with the customer, in the sales phase, try to figure out what's the customer's pains, what's the customer's need, what kind of capabilities within SuperOffice will solve these pains, and try to scope and box a project and an offering together with the customer. This is where you find the PEC, which was the previous session that we had, the pre-solution evaluation. When moving into a project and starting working together with a customer, when we have a signed agreement, we move into what we call the initiate phase, which is sort of ramping up the project together with the customer. It's pretty much the two project managers phase. They sit together and plan the activities, plan participation. What kind of people do you need to have present in this workshop and in this workshop? What resources do we have? What time schedule are we working towards? What critical issues do we need to address, etc. It's getting the project started. And then when that is said and done and all the activities are laid out in a schedule, we move on to the design phase, which is where the business analysis is taking place. And this is the phase where we, together with the customer, comes into detail on what should be delivered. We specify in detail the deliveries that are later implemented in the implement phase. And this is the whole set of activities within SIM. This picture shows you both the 4 phases and the short description of each phase, and the activities performed within each phase, and also connected to each activity you have the supporting documents that you can use. So this is a very good internal tool for you as consultants or salespeople, knowing what we actually can do in a full project. What we will go through, we went through this earlier. We will go through the business analysis, which is this activity here. We'll also go through the configuration specification, which is the next session, and also the Energizer workshop. Okay, we will go through this it's just one slide actually. Because when I started at SuperOffice, what I got was pretty much a template with a lot of headings. When I was sent out to my first, and was about to perform my first business analysis. That it was a template with a lot of headings. And it was like, okay, what do I do to be able to fill in? I guess the headings are important, I guess because someone has put them there. Maybe not all of them was important even. And I didn't have any idea on how to get from this blank paper to getting to know all the things I needed to know about the customer to be able to deliver a solution that would fit their needs. So what we did was trying to fill the implementation method with a lot of hows. How to perform different workshops and how to perform meetings to be able to deliver what we need to deliver. And that's sort of within the best practices. That is, with that said, we also needed a very efficient, and because SuperOffice is supposed to be implemented in an efficient way. So we wanted a method that fits our way of thinking, and it actually was in SuperOffice Norway that this brown paper method was first taken into use because of a former SuperOffice employee taking this method and also adapting it to the different workshops that we're holding within SuperOffice or within the implementation method. So what we use now to be able to perform the workshop and to be able to gain all the knowledge that we need when we come to the customer, we use the brown paper method with paper on the wall and post-its. And it's a very, when you use this together with the customer, you sort of get it's such a nice experience because most of the customers maybe come in and are a bit skeptical and saying like, well, we can never map a process, we don't have a process, and we don't know how to do this. So we just work a little bit like this and a little bit like that. We don't have an order, or we don't have a way of doing things or routines. We just want to work like this. But when you start working together with them and get them to put things up on the wall, they get an aha experience, and they feel that afterwards they have really produced something. Because it's just not a meeting where you go in and you discuss, because something happens during these workshops. That's sort of the definition of a workshop. It's the difference between a workshop and a meeting. All the participants are involved, and that they are engaged. They get tasks, and they are contributing to the content. And what we do is that we've taken the brown paper response method that it's called, and there's a number of techniques that you can use within the brown paper response method. And we've taken a number of these techniques and applied them onto our workshops. So there are more techniques like this within the brown paper response method, but the ones that we use within the different SIM workshops are these. And if you can master these, and even maybe a couple of more techniques, you can use them in all different kinds of settings. You can use them in the workshops, of course, according to the best practices, but you can also use them in normal customer meetings. When you're, for example, stuck in a discussion, you can do a brainstorming and get everybody to write down ideas on paper and sort of come forward within a discussion instead of getting stuck and just talking. So it's a very good, efficient method to use in different cases. And also internally at your office when you have a need of coming up with good ideas. I just give you a short. What you normally start with is the idea generation, which is where you give all the participants, not a too big a group. You shouldn't be this many because it's a bit of a too big group, but maybe 5 to 8. And you give everybody a set of post-its, and you get them to write down one idea per post-it. And that's important because a lot of the times you get a lot of ideas on one post-it, and that's very difficult because what you might need to do is to group the ideas into different areas, and normally there are different areas on the same post-it. So it's very important to describe how this should be done, exactly what type of information or one word or a keyword should be written down on each post-it. So it's often starting with idea generation. You often also group the ideas into different areas, and you might also need to prioritize, because there could be that we don't have the time to discuss all these questions that have come up or all these ideas. You need to prioritize. Which ones should we cover today, and which ones should we take in the next phase, for example. We also use it for a SWOT. I will go through that, and also the flow chart, how we use post-its and the brown paper method. Have any of you used this technique? I know that some of you have done it. How many? Yeah. Do you agree about what I'm saying? Is it?
Totally.
Yep. I think it's efficient.
Everyone's getting a bigger view of all the stuff around the project.
I think the biggest advantage that I find is that you get everybody around the table, or everybody in the room involved, and everybody gets a possibility to say their ideas or their feelings, instead of maybe just one talkative person doing all the talking, and maybe the other person are not feeling, well, maybe this is not right, and so you get everybody to write down their ideas. So it's very like a democratic method.
I think there's taking place a kind of interaction. So when you do an idea and the other, okay, I have another idea to that, and then we can discuss, and then we have a better solution. That's
also a very a good advantage. If you're at the meeting, like a normal meeting, and you're sitting down, I'm asking questions and I'm writing down the answers on my paper here, and then I'm asking another question and I'm writing down the answer and doing my notes. No one can see what I'm writing, and after a while, then, oh, what did we discuss? What did we say? And what have you actually written down here? It's very a very private way of discussing. If you use this method, everything is up on the wall. and it's something that is shared by everybody. The result is shared by everybody. So I often experience that during a workshop, you come back to what we have discussed already earlier. Say, well, I can now see when this note is up there. I want to put up another thing. It's something that is very visible, and you're sharing it during the workshop, which is one of the most important things. Together with it, you get everybody involved. Yeah. So that was just a short introduction to the method that we use in the workshops that we have. And of course, if you master it, you can use it in more cases.
Can also just add that if you need more information on because this is part of the basic sim training, that's facilitation and the method, then you should ask your local NIR for a training. We'll have one for the Norwegian partners in Norway now, 2 days for new employees and so forth, and this should be done locally by your NIR. Okay? The NIR for Sweden is Ingla, the NIR for Denmark is Lars. No more NIRs there at the moment. And for Germany it's Guido or Toby. Any other countries here? No? Yeah?
Yeah, for Benelux.
For Benelux, you've just changed?
Yeah.
Yeah. From Tim to Nils, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Okay, so what we will go through in this session is the business analysis workshop, which is, as I said earlier, taking place in the design phase. And as you can see, it's taking place as the first activity before we move on to anything else. This is an activity where you get to know the customer and know the customer's business need and business requirements. It's a business-oriented workshop. We have, as you see here, 3 parallel tracks, so to say, or approaches when it comes to starting a project or starting the design phase. You could either go for the very small, very product-oriented approach, where you just have an on-site configuration, sitting it down together with the customer, configuring into the admin tool. Of course, that means that you have no possibility of discussing any business issues. Discuss anything that has to do with workflow or reporting or KPIs or nothing like that. Just fill in the lists. And that's enough for some customers. Just be sure of what you're proposing for what kind of customer.
Before you move on, Ingela, the smallest one, we say usually for 5 users or less. Perfect for a lot of the online customers that we have now. We expect to have bigger online customers afterwards, but we'll help a lot of them for a good part of the way anyways.
And
yeah.
I also would like to add experience super users.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
change company and say we want SuperOffice in here, and they know what they.
Yeah, and they are really good admins in SuperOffice from before, because a lot of our customers are former employees in companies where they have SuperOffice and they want to keep on using it. Definitely.
But what you need to be aware, we've had a lot of trainings on these different approaches earlier, that you need to be aware of what kind of expectations does the customer have. Do you hear them saying something like sales process, or pipeline management, or funnel management, or activity management, or need to improve our sales, or any kind of sort of business-oriented words? This is not the way to go. You need to be aware that the customer needs more time, or rather we need more time with the customer to be able to give them the right solution. And as I said, product-oriented. Moving up a bit, to also move up in size, we have something called an energizer workshop. We will go through that in the afternoon, so I will not do that. I will not explain that in detail. We'll come back to that, but it's a combination of business analysis and customer configuration specification that we will look into after this session. So the result of of these will move into the next part of the design. We will end up with, we will start configuring the database based on the business requirements that we'll come up with during the business analysis. We've also figured out earlier in the design phase, earlier in the initiate phase, that we need imports or integrations. We'll perform that as well. Specifications. Yes.
Yeah, did that.
And then we just have the final part here, which is visual implementation or prototype presentation, where we sort of go through the final result of the BA and the import and the configuration specification together with the customer to get an okay on the design before we start implementing. So
now we're soon ready to dive into the BA.
Because the BA is the most sort of comprehensive approach when it comes to diving into the customer's business. It gives you the most knowledge about the customer when it comes to the business area. And SuperOffice, it also has to do with how you see SuperOffice. SuperOffice is software, but it's a software that is supposed to support or solve business critical issues. So it cannot stand alone for itself. It needs to fit into the customer's business and the requirements that they have. So this is a very important activity. What we do is that it gives us we spend the whole day together with the customer. Often two consultants or two consultants, one facilitator and one person documenting, because it's very difficult, as you will see, and maybe you've experienced that as well when you use the brown paper method. It's very difficult to facilitate and document at the same time. You sort of run up between the paper and down to the computer or your notebook, and then so you need to be two people. But you spend one day in general, one day per process together with the customer. And this is quite important also to understand that if we should be able to transfer knowledge to the customer, we need to spend time with them. And if you look at, for example, an offer and you see that there's a number of technical activities, installing and importing and setting up Exchange Sync, etc., and they are maybe one day on-site configuration. We spend very, very little time together with the customer discussing their business, which also gives us that it's very difficult for us to give them advice on how to set up SuperOffice to be able to support their business. So the time that we spend together with the customers is critical. And in this case, it's a one-day workshop together with the customer. Okay, moving on. So the goal is to get an idea of the area that the customer wants SuperOffice to support. It's normally the sales area, or maybe marketing, or maybe both. And we also get a knowledge
Customer service.
or customer service. Get an idea of how the customer wants to work. What's important is, and you will understand why, is that we need to perform one BA, one business analysis, per process. And that is because the agenda for the day, as I will show you later on, is that we spend half a day on mapping and going through the process, and half a day going through the area, doing a SWOT, and also letting the customer present their business, their customers, their market they're on, etc. So it's very difficult to be able to map more than one process per day. This takes place as the first activity before we can move on to anything else. It's a workshop, or it's a day where we have both workshop activities, but also we have some starting points where the customer present themselves and their ideas, etc. We use the format, the way the workshop is performed. We use that for all our modules. Sales and marketing process, e-marketing process, customer service processes. So there's no specific best practice for performing a business analysis on a sales process, or on the marketing process, or on a customer service process. So you just perform it the same way, but the process can differ. What we have, of course, is a best practice. As I said, it's generic. So it's one best practice that you can use on all types of processes. We also have a preparation letter. Of course, as Camilla said earlier, that's for all other workshops apart from the PSE. We have a preparation letter that tells the customer what to prepare. I will come back to that later on. And we also have the template or the report. That should be the result, the documented result after the workshop. Before it was just this one that we had. We already had these. But now we also have more supporting documents for preparing our consultants and preparing the customer. And then there's also a task description that you can use if the customer, for example, wants to expand their solution with another process or another department or another country, or maybe customer service instead of just sales and marketing. You can use that for just offering a business analysis.
Anyone who remembers the standard time in the task description for a business analysis activity based on the best practice? It's 4 days. It's 1 day with 2 consultants, and then you document and prepare.
So
everything is
something that I've learned, because business analysis very much sounds like one activity, and it could be sort of difficult to explain why this takes 4 days, business analysis. But if you instead of just calling it business analysis, you can call it business analysis. I've done it in Swedish, but business analysis work instead of just the actual workshop. It's more of an area that we cover, and it takes 4 days. And one of those days are together with you, customer. And then there are other things that we also do.
So it's also split it into preparation and documentation.
Yeah. And of course, this is it's such a critical activity. So it's of course important to prepare. It could be. Of course, you often have had the planning activities together with the customers. You have some idea of what you should do here and what areas to cover. But it's very important to prepare before. And hopefully you have documentation from the sales process, and maybe also from a PSE that has been performed, and all necessary material. Just plan and read on the internet or whatever you can find about the customer. And after doing that, plan together with the customer what should be covered during the workshop. You need to discuss in detail what the customer should prepare and what you should prepare, what process to cover, because that affects what people that should be present in the room. You cannot come there and say, well, what the process should we look into here? That should be prepared on beforehand and decided on together. And after that is done and all the preparations are decided together, you also distribute the information to the participants with the agenda and the bullets that they should prepare. Also on beforehand, at least 2 weeks. And this is very important. Let the customer know what they should have done. Maybe they should have a short presentation of 50 minutes, half an hour, that gives you all the things you need to know about their business and their area of expertise, and also that they know what they should contribute with during the day when it comes to the workshop and the actual SWOT and the actual mapping of the workflow. So they need to know what the day will look like. And it's also important, I didn't put that up here, it's also very, very important that you have the right participants. I think Camilla mentioned that earlier, for those of you present that when performing a workshop, you normally make decisions during the workshop. During the way, all the way, you make decisions. You say, well, can we agree on this? Yes, we can. The group decides upon this, and then we move on to the next issue. And then you go a bit further, and you discuss another area or another topic, and then you sort of come to a conclusion and decide upon that, and you move on. And if you have people not present in the room that could have any objections to the things decided there, you could ruin everything, or they could ruin everything when this should be implemented. So it's very, very important to have all the people with the right mandate in the room. So you're not, so the decisions that you made are not sort of discussed afterwards by someone else.
Especially in this workshop, I mean, we often hear sales managers say, well, I'll send my assistant for the workshop. She'll know what I want. But that doesn't go, because in this workshop we actually design the work process for all the salespeople in that company. And if someone should mean something about that, it's the sales manager, not the assistant. So especially in this workshop, it's important with higher level management present.
And I think that's also something that we've seen over the years, that the format of the project group have different during the project. Before we normally, or the customer normally set up, and we discussed that early in the sales phase together with the customer, set up a project group. And they were the same people that were present in all activities within the project. But maybe the best way of doing it, you need to maybe have different people present at different workshops. Of course you can still have a project group, but then you need to have sort of experts coming in and out of the project, giving their opinion and deciding upon important issues. So it's very, very important to discuss participation early in the planning phase of the project. So in the preparations together with the customer before the workshop, it's important to get the idea of where they're going. What's the goal with the project? And the goal with the workshop. We need to agree upon that. As we also said earlier, when you perform a workshop, that's something that you start with, that everybody that's in the room know what should be the result. We also need to know which work process or work process is, if you have more than one BA, should be covered in the project.
We have a really nice example from, not nice, but we have a good example from Norway, where a salesperson had spent 7 months grooming a customer so they were ready to buy from us. And they wanted the sales process covered. So they wanted to use SuperOffice to help their salespeople. And in our generic preparation letter, it says, welcome to the workshop. We will discuss the XX process. And he hadn't changed the XX process to the sales process. So after having spent 7 months with the customer, we sent out the preparation letter where it looked as if we knew nothing about them. So that's why the preparation part is really important, to take information from the sales process and actually use it. So it's not that it hasn't been wasted. It doesn't work with us anymore.
It's also important to get an idea of how the customer organization looks like. It gives you it's good because it gives you an idea if it's even possible to do this in one day. You can, if you, for example, have 2 departments where you have one direct sale department and one indirect sale, and they say, well, we want to have one process mapped. You could probably ask them, do you really work the same with direct and indirect sale? It's good to just get an idea of what kind of organization are you going to work with, and is this really going to work. And it's also, for the same reason, on a more detailed level, interesting to know what kind of users. Also to be prepared and know what kind of people and experience that you're meeting in the workshop and later on in the project. And then you can often read between the lines or hear between the lines other things that they would like to achieve. And it's very important when you're in the planning phase, and we haven't discussed that here today, but we have something called the PDD, where you plan the project, a project definition document, where you actually state the goal for the project. And you often hear goals, the customer saying, well, we want to increase our sales by 20%. And it's all, well, that might happen with SuperOffice as a supporting software, but it cannot be the goal for the project to improve your sales with 20%. So it's very important to discuss this, so they don't have expectations that we cannot deliver upon. So when we perform the workshop, we have an agenda looking like this, starting off with the customer presenting the goals and objectives with the project. This needs to be done by the customer, because they actually own the goal, and they own their objectives. You should be aware of them, of course, and they shouldn't come as a news for you because you planned this together. But it could be that there are new participants in the workshop that hasn't been part of the sales process or that hasn't been involved. It often happens that you hear people saying, well, I was called to this meeting, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And especially if they haven't sent the preparation letter to all the participants. So this is presented by the customer, and then you also get advise them to present a little bit of how they work. What market are they in? What customers do they work with? What kind of people do they meet? In general, what type of business do they have? This also, within the area that you're working with, of course. This also gives you an idea of where you're heading, and it gives you if you've worked for a while, it also gives you references to other solutions or other customers or success stories or things that have gone bad earlier at other customers, and you can provide them with a lot of good information and good ideas and good experiences if you can get this information and try to map them towards all the knowledge that you have from other customers. So this is very important. And then you sort of step onto the scene as a facilitator in the workshop. I would say that this is very much a meeting where they prepare, for example, a PowerPoint, and then they present it, and you get the possibility to ask questions, etc. And then we move on to the workshop part, where we perform a SWOT analysis, where we go through the strengths and the weaknesses, and the opportunities and the threats within the selected area, which is very important. We do not perform the SWOT on the whole company, because you will get up things like, well, we have a very bad intranet, we have the union is too strong at our company, we cannot do this and this. It's things that are not really relevant at all. So it's very important when stating the goal for the day and what area to cover, to give them the right task when you do perform the SWOT. I will come back to that later. And then you also have the mapping of the work process for the selected process that we're working with. Normally, this takes half a day, and this takes half a day. How many of you have performed a BA? Do you recognize this, or?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you agree on the time distribution?
Depends on the project, of course.
Yeah. And it's also this, for example, can take a lot of time, depending on how you give them the task. If you, for example, limit the time they have on writing down notes, instead of saying write down as many as you can, and it depends on how you perform this work as well. And also, of course, this can take quite some time.
I think if you start using the method, the customers already don't know the method for themselves, and of course it sounds crazy to say, oh, I need 4 days for this workshop and blah blah blah. So if you start with 1 or 2 days and then you see what is going on there, so okay, I need more, I know, so I can see it. There's a kind of barrier to start just with little projects, maybe just only, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 users like that. So maybe you can twice in pieces. You start just with
And in
a
that
little
case,
one.
the energizer approach that Camilla will go through
Okay.
later this afternoon, it's a good approach that is smaller, but it's still sort of
Covers both
It
business
covers-
and product.
and it's sort of quality assured.
Yeah,
you
of
can
course.
still perform it with quality instead of just the problem is if you start cutting the time with not not removing any tasks.
Yeah, so
You
this
just
is,
end up with
You
doing
have
things
to
for
reduce
free.
the scope if you want to cut the
of
time.
course, this is
Yeah.
no final solution, but you can start with it, and the customer can see, okay, so this
Sure.
is how you're going on, and then he knows, okay, I have to invest more money to get the right result. So this is the idea for that, right?
In the energizer, we do this one, little bit of this, and the configuration in one day. I mean, that's about as compact as you can get it.
In one day together with the customer,
Yeah.
but the two people.
Yeah.
So in whole is 3 days.
Just to add, this one you need to control. This one can get completely out of hand. With in the first ones we've spent 1 day on the swap and we ended up with no process. So this one you have to control. This one the customer has to prepare for. I've had a quite interesting experience now together with Gutta with the SuperNet project that you mentioned. Because then suddenly we are participants in a workshop facilitated by someone else. And we, at least I went to that meeting and had not thought enough about the work process or the questions. And what I tend to see then from a customer standpoint is that suddenly I'm captured by my own rash decisions. So if we adapt this to our customers, if they come to our workshops and they are not prepared for how they want to perform sales in that organization, they are going to create a bad sales process or not an optimal one. So again, the preparation letter and making the customer understand that you need to have discussed this internally and you have to come here with an opinion. You have to come here as a sales manager with a vision of what you want to measure your salespeople on. Otherwise, this one will only be as good as the sum of the participants there. And if they're not prepared, that's not very good.
So in this case, you do the same as also in the PSE, sending the preparation letter 2 weeks up front so they can come up with the right info
Yes.
at this moment, not
Yes.
start thinking about it at this time.
And I think it's also important when you actually have because you have to discuss together with the customer. You have to prepare this activity together. And at that point, it's also necessary to discuss what should be prepared, what people should be present, why should this person be there? Well, that person should be the one deciding upon this and this. Well, he needs to prepare these and these questions. You need to be in agreement and also be in agreement on who distributes this information to the participants, because that's maybe not always clear. Is it us or is it their project manager? Or so it's you just need to communicate. So what we do is that
Is that okay?
yeah. What we do, and this is such a good thing to use, not only in the VA, but also, for example, as we discussed earlier, if you use the PSE or you perform the pre-solution evaluation workshop, it could also be a good idea to perform at least parts of this to get more knowledge about the customer. Because what we do is that we take the area that we're looking into, for example, sales. And we have hopefully the right participants in the room, and we give them post-its. And you normally have one color for S. Like this. And then you give all the participants some post-it notes or a whole piece of this of the same color, and then you say depending on where you are in time and how many participants, you say, for example, well, let's take 3 minutes and write down as many strengths as you can come up with when it comes to your work with sales. And why is that important? Why is it important to know what they're good at? Any ideas? Should we make them worse? Should they be better, or what do you call it?
Should they improve?
Should they improve, or should they be? I don't know what you call it in English. If they're good at something, should they continue to be good at this after we implement SuperOffice?
Yes,
Maybe even better. So, of course, it's very important for us to understand their strengths, to be able to continue to support them, and maybe even use the strengths for them to be good at things that they are maybe not so good at. We know so much about this area, so we understand when we see the strengths, we understand how these can be mapped into SuperOffice and maybe improved even more. So of course it's very, very important to get this information, so we don't ruin anything by implementing SuperOffice.
Another important thing is that this is the area where you usually get feedback from the people who's really passionate about something. For instance, the guy who's made the perfect Excel sheet, and he wants, if they are going to stop using that, you have to make sure that they have a report in SuperOffice where you can get the same data. So you make sure that you don't alienate some of the really passionate people in the group.
And it's also important to, when what we also do is that you get all the people to write down, for example, for 3 minutes, all the strengths that they have, and then you get each and every one of them coming up and presenting their strengths, explaining why they think this is a strength. And then you get the possibility to ask them questions, because you need to translate this into SuperOffice findings, or into the SuperOffice world, thinking, well, how could this affect the solution? How could we support this? Why is this important? And you need to ask questions to be able to dig further into the different strengths. So each and every one come up and present all the strengths that they have, and then you do the same with weaknesses, for example, and opportunities and threats. And you come up with you do it on the brown paper, so you come up with a complete SWOT. And what you normally see is that you have several people often mention the same strengths. They also mention the same weaknesses. There are often a couple of strengths and a couple of weaknesses that are represented by everyone. And it also gives you a possibility to say that, well, we can see here that you experience that you're very weak at following up on codes, for example. Well, okay, we need to see to that you are better on this. We'll give you a support, see to that SuperOffice will be configured, so you will not lose any codes or lose track of the codes that you've sent out. So, but we can see that, well, you have one weak area here. It's only one note. No one else has said it. It could be important for you, but if we look at all the things that are up here, I think we should focus on these. So it gives you an idea together with the customer what areas that you should focus on, just because they're probably the ones with most strengths and most weaknesses. And then you have the opportunities, which is opportunities that they see in their market and the world that they are living in. And it could be that these are interesting to know if SuperOffice should be prepared to be able to handle these opportunities, or maybe help them to explore the opportunities that they see. So it could be could still be interesting, although the strengths and the weaknesses are more directly connected to the implementation of the software. And the same for the threats. They can see external threats that they can handle if they have a well-functioning system, and a system with, for example, all their customers segmented. If they have a threat where they see a new competitor coming up in the market, they need to strengthen their own customer relations, for example. And this is extremely, extremely helpful when you move into building the solution later on. Any questions about the SWOT? Of course, you can move on. This is an example. Of course, I recommend that you take photos. because it's, you see, I've folded these. You see it, the line, I folded them, and then I took the photos back home in the office. Of course, it's nicer if you take the picture when they're up on the wall. But it's a very good idea. It's a good idea because you can use the photos when you document. I will show you a picture later on. And it's also, of course, I really recommend to use different colors here. Can you figure out why? Maybe for the same reasons we discussed the numbering here earlier.
When they fall off.
Exactly, because they fall off.
Back to the office.
And you don't want to mix strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats all together, because the exercise is sort of wasted.
So it's kind of embarrassing if you place it wrong.
Yeah. So it's this was a close call though, quite similar. But it's just a tip. Don't only use yellow ones. Try to
So
have.
when you find it under your shoe, then what?
Yeah, I know what it is.
It's not only a close call.
I know
This
because
one.
I know we ran out of these. They're actually the same. But that's also why it's good to take a photo with high resolution, so you can actually read on the notes if you look at the picture. I've done that a couple of times, sort of magnifying the picture to actually see what it said on the notes. That's also something that you can tell the participants that they should write, so you can tell what it says, because there are some people writing like this. So it's short wordings with big letters.
It's always fascinating to see that some people are not able to use keywords. They have to write long sentences. Always, in every group, there is one who needs to write the long sentence.
Yeah. So the next part of the BA is mapping the work process. And sometimes the customer has a work process, has a defined work process. But we had a discussion earlier here that they had the work process, but they've never seen it. It was just on the internet somewhere. So no one worked according to it, and they didn't know about it. So that can still be the case. And the important thing with mapping the work process or going through the work process is that you as a consultant get the knowledge of how the customer wants to work and how this should fit into SuperOffice. So even if they have a map process, you need to go through it. You also need to make it sort of SuperOffice-ified with the sort of the namings and the events that will happen within SuperOffice to be able to know, for example, what scripts to create and what templates to put into the software, etc. And here we also use the brown paper method, up with the paper on the wall like this. And we also have the different post-it with different colors. I didn't do my work here earlier, because you should always do the legends, even on this. You say that blue post-its means activity, yellow post-its means templates, green post-its means decision points, and you could have more. This is a real-life case, and they didn't have any scripts, but you can also have one legend saying script, for example, or one post-it saying script. So, of course, what kind of process you will get up on the wall, you have decided on beforehand what kind of process you should go through. But it could be, for example, a sales process, or a support process, or maybe a marketing process. What you do, this is not an easy task, and it requires quite a lot of you as a facilitator. I've tried different approaches when performing a BA, and I've come up just how to get the things up on the wall, out of their heads and up on the wall. At one time, I let everybody map their own process, and we had them all put up underneath each other. And then we saw, well, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. We could pretty much get the consensus on what activities to have. It takes quite some time to do that, but it was like a trial and error work. So what we do now is that I start with putting up the legends, and then I have all the post-its with all the colors in my hand, and I say, okay, we are supposed to map the direct sales process. What happens in the process? What kickstarts the process? What's the first activity? And then you come up with a suggestion, or you can suggest them. If there are no suggestions, you can say, well, is there a contact of any kind? Oh yeah, it could be. They call, or we call them, or... Okay, so there's a contact activity. So we write that down and I put it up here. And I say, well, okay, if you call the customer, for example, or they call you, do you have any supporting documents? For example, what kind of questions should you ask a new customer or a prospect? Oh, well, we have a checklist that we need to go through to be able to get the customer profile in to know what kind of customer it is. Okay, so I'll put up a template saying check this customer profile. Okay, what's the goal with this activity? What should be the next activity? If everything works according to plan, and you see that this is the best practice, taking a sale from A to Z, what should be the next activity? Well, the goal with that contact should be to book a meeting. Okay, so the next activity is a visit or a meeting together with, or at the customer, or with the customer. Yeah, that's our next activity. Okay, what kind of documents do you need? At the meeting or after the meeting? Well, we should document all our meetings in a visit report. Okay, so I put down up a template here. Okay, after this visit, do you have any idea of if this is interesting, for example? Do you see this as a lead or something that you want to be able to measure in the system? Yeah, we think that if we come this far, it's important for us to have a possibility to measure all these ongoing discussions that we have. Okay, so the next activity should be to register a sale activity in SuperOffice. You have an idea, an estimate, or a rough idea of what kind of things that you're selling and the amount. And in this case, it's Visma partner. It's a software vendor that we did this with. And they say, well, we want to register a sale to be able to measure this. And then we discussed a bit about what's the probability of getting a deal when you are here at this phase. Well, it's let's say 5%. And normally, of course, this is the result. This is the end result. It's very neat and nice, and everything is in a straight line, etc. What you normally do during the way is that you put up a number of activities, and then someone says, well, I see we forgot, we need to do this thing after here. We forgot one activity. Okay, well then you just move the notes like this, and then you just write down a new activity saying thank you phone call or whatever. So it's also the advantage of putting everything up on the wall. You get the possibility to move the notes around, and people can come with input, and you see the logic up there on the wall. And it's also very, very useful and almost necessary if you are mapping a sales guide within SuperOffice where you have the different phases and the different activities within each phase.
And documents.
And documents. So what we start, just one more thing. What I've also started to do now is that, well, okay, when you're in between here, what would you call this? Because that would be the name of the phase within the SuperOffice sales guide. Well, what kind of status are you in? And they decide of a name. And then we see it, well, when you're at 15, but not updated to 40, what would you say would be the name of this phase? What state are you in? Well, we say this is sort of budget discussions or whatever. And then you get the name of the phases also when you map the sales guide within SuperOffice.
Spørsmål her?
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah. In the first point of contact there, you often have phone in, you have cold call.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you place all the activities so you can just configure the SuperOffice?
What I normally do is that when you're, that's in the next session, but when you're in the configuration specification, you put this up on the wall. And you normally, either you do it there or you do it already here. You say, what kind of points do you want to measure here? Well, this, for example, it's not important to measure this specific activity. It's not important to measure if it's a phone call, if it's an incoming or outgoing, or maybe it is. Well, you should perform X number of outgoing phone calls, or first phone calls, or cold calls, or canvas calls, etc. And you discuss, well, in this case, this activity here needs to be defined as a specific activity within the SuperOffice. So it could be that the configuration will end up with other names or more names, but this is the workflow will look like this.
So in the BA we don't configure, but in the Energizer, where we start with the workflow, we do configure as well. But that demands a not too complex process to be able to do it all in one day.
Yeah.
And for example, it can also be, in this case, we have different meetings. We have one, it's called visit, we'll call it meeting instead, with customer. We have one meeting, and then we have another meeting with the customer, and then we have another meeting where we present the agreement, and then we maybe have another meeting. You could say just meeting, but when you discuss the configuration, you say, is it important for you to be able to track this meeting apart from this meeting? Should it be possible to find both of them? So it comes down to what kind of tracking and goals you have. Normally you have, for example, goals on how many first meetings you have with a new prospect, as we have in our database, for example. In this case, that has to be a particular activity. The other ones could be called meetings.
I have a question. For those of you who has performed the business analysis workshop, how many of you experience that the sales managers have this in their head before they start, before you start the workshop? That they are really conscious about their sales process?
Very few.
Very few. Any other experiences? Ronny?
I think when it comes to this kind of workshop, it gets a lot of discussions, and many people are not, as you said earlier, prepared.
Yeah.
So it get then kind of internal discussion, and then it goes much time in this kind of process. So, and my experiences also is that, as you said, maybe you have solved in a solution with more than or several processes. So you have to focus on smaller part in this BAs, I think.
But, because I think in the sales process, if you talk to the sales manager and you tell him that we will help you, together with you, we'll take you by the hand and we'll map your sales process. That is such a powerful sales incentive for, I mean, the sales managers love that. They want to buy from us because we will actually help him get better in his job. And this is something that I find that a lot, the minute you say the word process, a lot of sales managers or of our customers, they're scared because process sounds really hard and difficult and, well, I don't have my process. So they say, no, we don't work according to a process. Of course, they usually do because most salespeople are trained to do things a specific way, and that's a process. But they don't think of it as that. So I think that's a really good sales argument.
Sometimes when I feel also that that's the wrong word, I just use a routine or use another naming to not frighten them.
I think also best practice is a good word.
Best practice,
what's the best practice for how your salespeople work?
Or
that's
you
what
want
you create here.
Or you want, it's important to get this is the way they want to work. Because if you document how they work today, that might not be what they want to work with. So it's important to perform a workshop of the scenario that they want to have in the system. Otherwise, you would just end up with a mapping and process that they don't want to have. So it's important to get the. I know that we've had.
Yeah, when we implemented this workshop, a few of the first consultants performing it weren't trained well enough. So they misunderstood. So they didn't create the wished process or the optimal process. They only documented the process that the customer had today. So we weren't any closer to to the target.
But often you have to start with to document the process they have today, because they aren't aware of how they want to work, and then you discuss it when you...
But that's why you want them to have done a lot of that work beforehand. Otherwise you will have to be really leading in that discussion, and it will end up maybe not being their own decisions, but something that we force in the workshop.
Or guide.
Or guide, but we discussed that in the previous session. If you can plant the seed, but you can get the customer to articulate it, they will own it. But if you have to say it, you own it.
Okay, just move on. Yeah. I think we've been through this, just mapping the activities, the document, scripts, etc. Useful for configuring later on in the next activity. I've been through this. This is actually, it's not this process, or it is. It's actually this process as it looked when I came back from the customer. And this is the same process when I documented it. So this is what the customer got, this and the next page. And if you move on, the important thing here is that we need to hand over the result of the workshop to the customer. And it's also important for us to remember all the things that we've discussed and decided upon. So the report is very important. And of course, important to document while it's fresh, especially the SWOT analysis, which is just a number of short wordings on post-its. Try to explain it, filling it up with more text. This is also why we need to be two people. One facilitating and one writing down all the discussions and all the conclusions and everything that is said around all these wordings. Because that's the content of the workshop. Yes? And of course this is form the basis for all the things that we do in the configuration workshop later on. And this is something that also will be used in the training, for example, in the process.
And that's really important. Because then you have a process-oriented training, saying this is the way we want you to work in this company. So we'll teach you how to see if a customer is in the system already and to book a meeting and so forth. Just one tip when it comes to this. Sometimes the customer, they won't buy from us until we have performed this activity, because they don't know if we can deliver the solution that they want. So what we sometimes say in the sales phase is that we can perform the business analysis and we can map your work process. This you will need anyway, no matter what vendor you choose. So you can take that report and take it with you to any other vendor if you want, but then at least you will have a requirement of the work process that needs to be supported in the system. I don't think anyone who's done that in a sales process has lost the sale after having performed this workshop. Because of course we are not objective.
And I just wanted to show, if you move on to the next picture, just how in the business analysis template, now this is in Swedish, but it's the same case where I normally, if you take the picture, just put it in, and then of course post-its is very difficult to document. But if you document it in a matrix like this, or in a table, all the notes or the post-its, and then you can just give write down the conclusions. The majority of the strengths were in this and this area. And the same for weaknesses, etc. It's a good idea of doing it, because in the template it's just the header SWOT, and then it's strengths and weaknesses, etc. But this is a good idea. And also when it comes to the workflow, put the workflow in, and also describing the different steps in text.
And then you also list the documents that you have.
List the documents, and also if you've discussed any points here or things that should be measured, you also note that down, and then you bring it on to the next phase, and you see that those are put into the configuration.
Makes it so much easier to revitalize the customer after a few years if you have this description. For instance, they can say, well, after our first offer, 5% is much too low. We're already at 20% probability of winning the sale. So then you can reconfigure easier.
Okay, just a short recap. Business analysis, the full scope of analyzing the customer, 1 BA per process, going through both a SWOT and the mapping of the process. Gives you a in-depth knowledge of the customer, and you can really help them and guide them and getting the system set up correctly for them, helping them in the best way. Okay, just think that's it. Yes.
On time.
Yeah.